What's up everyone, welcome to DIY Dudes. In this video we're going to show you a build that we think turned out absolutely epic. It's this backyard fire pit that's built into the deck and features a 4-foot long gas flame trench.
This thing isn't just your average propane fire pit bowl, it looks like it's straight off of a restaurant patio. The best part is, I built this with pretty much parts all off of Amazon, and all these bricks came from my local building supply store.
So really easy stuff to source, wasn't that expensive, and actually as you're going to see from the video, it's pretty easy to put together.
Let's do this.
Before we started building anything, we needed to consider how the entire space was going to look when everything was done out here. And what we were going to do is, and actually we still are, we're planning on building a big L-shaped couch around this that's going to be like physically built in. It's not just some patio furniture that we're going to throw there. So it was really important that we understood what those dimensions were going to be before we went ahead and laid out the fire pit, because we wanted to make sure there's enough room to walk around it and all that sort of stuff. So we took some painter's tape and marked out the outside edge of where that couch is going to be, and then that gave us the buffer that we needed around the fire pit before we laid anything out and cut the deck.
So now that I've figured out where my bench is gonna go, I'm gonna go ahead and lay out my fire pit. I want about a 24-inch walking area on both sides of the fire pit, and I also want my starting point to be roughly just on one side of my first joist so that I'm only cutting and replacing one joist. So in my case, that's gonna be about right here. 2. Perfect. So to the edge of that joist, it's 23 inches. And then I'm just going to mirror that same measurement on this side. So this corner right here is going to be the starting location for my fire pit. I'm going to build the bricks out that way and then lengthwise that way, and it should look great.
Since this fire pit's going to be physically built into the deck, that means we got to cut the deck and kind of take it apart. And once you do that, you can't really go back. So we need to make sure that this is perfect and as precise as possible so that we don't run into any issues down the line. So what we're going to do here is we've kind of roughly traced out our layout. We're going to take all of our stones that we're going to use and place them all exactly where they're supposed to go so that we can see that it's going to work and we can fit it with the fire pit that's going to sit on top before we actually make any cuts.
All right, so we've got the cap all laid out. Well, not entirely laid out, both ends laid out. What we need to do now is do a couple cuts. I need to cut these two end pieces to get rid of this overhang here and here. And then I also need to cut the middle piece to be a nice piece right in the middle, because I want to have this thing constructed symmetrically where both ends are exactly the same and then there's one cut piece right in the middle. This is a fixed point where I know this is going to be here 100%. I'm going to measure from that point to the center of the fire pit. And then that length is the length that I want this stone to be. I don't want to just simply come here and mark this and just cut it off, because it's not going to be 100% accurate. I want to make this as precise as I can. All right, so I'm 16 inches from this end to the center of the fire pit. So this piece is going to be cut 16 inches as well as this piece. And I'm going to take both cuts off of the center. And then I'll do the exact same thing on the other two stones on the other side. Now for the middle, we've laid this out so that this course of stones is tight with this wall of the fire pit. Same with that side. So I know that this gap here is, that's the gap I'm going to have once this is all fully constructed. These ends are pretty much in the right spot. And then I'm going to have one stone stuck in the middle here to close in that gap. Yeah, so I'm dealing with a 15-inch cut right there. So this stone is 24. No, this stone is 18. So I'll take about 3 inches off of that. I'll do that cut here and then the same cut on that stone there, and I should be good to go with the cap. So I'm not exactly sure, but this fire pit probably weighs like 2,000 or 3,000 pounds. So I couldn't just put it on top of my deck. So we had to cut an opening into the deck, reinforce the foundation of the deck, and actually set this thing on a solid foundation of granular material.
Yeah, and it's also a good idea to use granular below grade, below the deck, because it's a lot cheaper than getting a whole bunch of these landscaping stones and burying 2 or 3 courses of them. So you can just pick up some granular, it's fairly cheap, pack it in place, and it's gonna be just as solid a foundation as it would have been if you use something like hard masonry stone.
So for the granular base, we bulked it in just using a wheelbarrow. I brought it over from my truck. I built a makeshift little ramp to ramp it up onto the deck so I could physically dump it right in the hole to limit the amount of work I had to do. It's not easy to get a few 100 pounds of granular from point A to point B.
Yeah, and then you don't need any special equipment to really get it compacted in there. We just used an ordinary hand tamper, and pro tip, do it in lifts. So instead of bulking in like a foot or 2 a stone, whatever you need to do, just do it in small layers at a time, compact it so you can really get that consolidated in there and get a nice strong foundation.
So I'm at the point where I'm about ready to start laying some stones. To fill you guys in on what I needed to do to get to this point, I used 3/4 inch stone to get up to just about the underside of this first deck board. And then I used about 1 inch of fine screening material to level everything out and make a nice flat surface for the stones to rest on. Additionally, I ran the propane supply line. I had to remove this deck board so that I could conceal it. And I have just about enough line to get to the center of the 2 fire pit pans. And the line is gonna run nicely underneath this deck out to the side where I'm gonna have my propane tanks concealed afterwards by a nice box. So when I cut the hole in the deck, I tried to keep it as tight as possible to what I thought was going to be the opening required for the fire pit, but I had to leave it a little bit big just to make sure everything was going to fit 100%. So that left a little bit of a gap that I wanted to cover up afterwards with some trim.
Yeah, and for the trim, what we basically did was we just went to the building supply store and got a couple pieces of ordinary pressure treated deck boards, and then in order to cut them to the width that we wanted, because we don't want like a full deck board sticking out from around this thing all the way around like a huge frame, we just ripped it along the table saw. We each held one end and it worked out pretty well. And then using a mitre saw, we just cut 45s on there so that everything would fit nicely and make a nice rectangle around the entire fire pit.
As we were actually installing the trim, I butted the corners up tightly and put 1 screw on each side just to make sure everything fit 100%, and worked my way from one corner all the way around back to the start of that same corner just to make sure everything was tight all the way along.
For the actual flame trench, we just purchased these kits off of Amazon. They're stainless steel, 4 feet long, 8 inches wide, and they've got the gas burner pre-installed and ready to go and all the hardware that you need to get it up and running.
Our kit actually came with an automatic starter. We didn't use it for this build, but maybe you can.
To put the finishing touch on these fire pits, we got these glass beads. These are like an aqua blue color, but they come in all sorts of different colors, so you can really customize it however you want. But what's cool about these is they're actually designed for use in the fire pit. So you're not gonna get any popping or cracking or any issues from the heat below. And we went with 2 bags per trench, which completely conceals the gas burner below. So you get this effect where the flames are just coming out of these glass beads, and it looks freaking epic.
All right, guys, this thing's a wrap. Turned out great, and there's nothing left to do but enjoy our new fire pit.
Yeah, and make sure you come back soon and check out that other video where we build in that couch back there, because I think that's going to be a pretty epic addition to this entire space. And hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming videos, and we'll see you soon.